Hey guys, this is Anon, and today I'm going to focus on the Jagdtiger, the German Tier 9 tank destroyer. And the main reason I want to focus on this tank is just a few patches ago, several of the higher tier tank destroyers were rebalanced, and this was given the highest DPM in the game for any tank, which is obviously a pretty big trophy, and it jumps several tanks to get up there. It jumps the Tortoise and the Object 263 and several other tanks, so it got a really large buff, and it really changed, I think, the balancing on this tank and kind of how you can approach it in battle. This isn't a tank that I ever really disliked. I just didn't drive it a whole lot. It's very slow, and so that's something you have to kind of deal with. It's got that kind of standard German tank destroyer profile where it's big and slow. It's got a fairly good gun, very accurate, but it tends to lumber around the battlefield a little bit, and the armor on it is actually good. It just, you have to be very aware of how you're using it. So even though the gun is a fairly obvious thing with this tank, and it's something I'm going to highlight quite a bit, I'm going to focus on the armor a lot too, because I think it's something that is really misunderstood on this tank. This thing actually has 8 degrees of gun depression, so when you merge that with the frontal slope armor, if you can keep your lower plate covered, it actually gets a lot of auto bounces, especially at tier 9 and 8, and even at tier 10 when you keep the angles looking the right way. So a lot of the gameplay I have is going to kind of show parts of that. So this particular battle, and the reason I started with this, is because I wanted to talk about kind of the versatility with this tank. Because of that armor profile and the extremely high DPM, I feel like you can play this tank a lot of different ways as long as you are good at kind of reading the matchups and reading the map and knowing what's going on and adjusting on the fly. If you're really good kind of in those ways, I think this is a tank that really kind of shines for those people. So this map, because I was the only tier 9, I pushed forward a lot farther than I necessarily would have. There's a lot of nice little slopes here that let me keep that frontal plate at good angles, but also because I'm going to out DPM everything in this game, if I get myself in kind of a bad situation, I can kind of start wiggling around to shake them off and be able to really farm with that DPM, because that's going to scare a lot of tanks off. As soon as you sit in front of them and fire 2 or 3 shots, pretty much any tank is going to be pretty terrified at that point. So the Persian gives me a little bit trouble. He's got really good APCR pen, and so when he dives, I decide to go ahead and push right on through, and this is going to turn into a full-on brawling situation. There's not a lot of TDs, especially slow heavy ones, where I think that's really advisable, but as long as you're really aware of where everything is on the map, it's something you can really utilize. So I go straight at the IS-3 because I know the Pershing has gone all the way to the left, and the STA is pretty far to my right, and I can tell by the minimap he's behind the rocks, so he doesn't have clear shots at me, and his low alpha gun is going to take a long time to kind of work through. So instead I can, again, like I said, use the high DPM on this gun to really kind of push my way through and equalize this game a little bit, because we were in a pretty bad situation, and all these tier 8s are going to have a little bit of struggles penning me. So, as always with turretless tank destroyers, you have to move around the field a little bit differently. I do a lot of kind of backwards rotating to traverse instead of just sitting there and letting it spin, because it lets it go a little bit faster, get your gun in front of them. Like I said, this has just allowed this kind of unique balance of tank destroyer to get us right back in the game. So it's pretty much just farm up time here, but a lot of it was getting some time to kind of talk about this, and I'm going to focus on those other highlights a little bit more in these next 2 games, but I feel like this was kind of a good way to start and really show kind of how beautiful this gun can be. So here's a nice ace. Kind of surprising that it was able to do it with 5k on a battle where I'm the only tier 9, but you'll just take those kind of as it comes. Okay, switching now to Mirage, I think this is another battle that's going to really highlight kind of what I was talking about on the versatility and using kind of an armor DPM combination. I think part of what's really unique about this tank is usually the way Wargaming does balancing is if you have armor, you subtract probably speed and DPM. If you have DPM, you usually subtract armor. Sometimes you get speed. Usually you can get kind of 2 things, but to get everything is pretty rare. So this particular combination of DPM and armor is pretty unique and not something we find a lot in this game. So it's kind of an interesting combination. So I'm working these ridgelines, and it's for all the reasons I was saying before. There's a lot more tier 9s in this battle, so I really want to keep good profiles on my armor. And just by peeking up and using that gun depression, anytime you do that where you're using the maximum amount of your gun depression on a ridgeline so that your essentially front plate is sticking up, it gives it a much harsher angle, and unless the enemy tank is shooting straight down on you, it gives you really nice auto bounce angles. So once I see tanks start to pop up on the right, I completely rotate to work on our flank because it was pretty obvious what was happening and they were pushing pretty hard. And this is when that DPM really comes in handy. I'm giving myself a really small profile, and every time I move to take the shot, I roll up on this hill just a little bit so I can use that gun depression, and it gave me that great auto bounce on IS-3. Unfortunately, the 103 on my right has a much harsher angle on my armor, especially the side angle, so that's why he's getting some pens. And then this T-44 pushes through, which is pretty much the worst case scenario and not really what I want. But luckily I have this IS-6 cover me, and he does a fantastic job of kind of protecting my side. I'm still going to take a few shots from it, but he does a really good job with that, so I can focus on these higher tier tanks that are pushing us really hard and putting this gun to work. So anytime something comes through, I can then start to wiggle in a way that usually a lot of heavy tanks do well. And now I took the shot there, but a lot of times if you just start to get that, and it's because he was doing a good job of shooting at my lower plate, I can't be hold down quite in this situation. But now that I got this dead carcass in front of me, now I'm hold down, and I can basically just kind of rotate out to take the shot. So even though I'm only at 80 hit points, I'm extremely hard to kill because there's just not good angles to shoot at. And you can see right there that 103 getting the auto bounce angle because my front plate is raised and he doesn't have his gun down quite enough. And I can just keep using this dead corpse to give him the hardest parts of my armor. I'm essentially side scraping off of this tank at the same time, can just rotate back. He's hitting high on my plate, which is really difficult to pen, and just able to keep kind of farming through. So again, versatility. I know I lost a lot of hit points there, and that's because we were in a completely surrounded situation, but it took so many tanks, and especially all their high tier tanks, a lot of time to really take those hit points from me, and it was able to kind of hold that flank and really lock it down. Not an ace game on that one, but kind of a great way to showcase what's happening. And honestly, that was kind of a mastery performance with that tank because you're using it in all the ways it's intended. Okay, so I'm going to switch to one last battle here on Canal, and I'm going to play this 100% differently than the others, but still using some of those same tactics, because this is a tier 10 battle, which you're going to obviously run into a lot with the tier 9 tank destroyers. So because of that, I don't want to be quite so aggressive. There are a lot of good ridges on this map that, as long as the red team puts themselves in the right position, I could use the hills to really use that front plate well, but because of this team makeup on both sides, I want to go ahead and start in a sniper position. I know I can move around, but the gun on this really is fantastic. It has the second best dispersion for a tier 9 tank destroyer, just slightly behind the Tortoise, while having the best DPM, some of the best aim time. So gun handling is really only second to the Tortoise, but the armor profile on it is so much better than the Tortoise, and you know, I'm not actually sure on the camo rating how they compare. But I know that because of the armor profile in this, I make myself a much smaller target. I'm essentially using this little hill on top of the hill right in front of me. So I'm very hold down, and I'm rolled backwards just a little bit. So again, I'm getting that front plate up. So even if something does take a shot at me, it's going to have a hard time getting through unless they're shooting premium ammunition at kind of the right angles. So I'm not going to move around a whole lot in this battle because essentially I don't have to. I'm doing the most for my team by sitting here and holding the back. We had two heavies right here trying to cross bridge, and by instantly putting shots into that Conqueror and stopping him, it kept them from advancing forward. So I can see a couple tanks to the left start to push through, but since they're not in the way, I want to keep helping my team and keep the gun going as long as possible. This T-54 is in the open, so I'm going to take pretty much always the easy shots I can get, or shooting at advancing tanks. So because this is the easiest shot that I have right now, I'm going to go ahead and take it. And again, working the high DPM to do it, and the great kind of dispersion values and everything like that. So Just going to keep working around, and I can see again those two tanks have started to push through a little bit farther, and I'm starting to think they're going to cross ahead. But an IS-7 on that side is such a great target. I would pretty much always want to shoot that. I know this IS-4 is going to spot me now because he's so close, but again, I've got this great angle going on. That Tortoise went ahead and bounced right off my front plate because I'm just using those angles, and I don't want to roll down essentially until I have to, because on flat ground you're always going to be a much easier target, and Tortoise does have some really good DPM, so I'm trying to get rid of this most dangerous target, and that's why I go ahead and pop the Adrenaline, because the IS-7 is always going to be the hardest kill in this situation. And now we can kind of focus on being able to get a mop-up situation here, which just being able to choose targets correctly, and again, just reading the map, both the map and the team makeups is so important. There's a lot of situations where you need to go ahead and push forward and be that aggressor. If I was, again, that only tier 9 in the battle, I would have rolled up with the mediums and tried to be kind of that tip of the spear, because I'd have the armor to fight off all the tier 8s for them. But because in a tier 10 battle, it's better to go ahead and hold back and make sure you can keep that high DPM in the game, because your point is to farm damage, and that's what I want to do. So I hope this helps a little bit. I feel like this is a very misunderstood tank, and I personally think it's phenomenal. It just needs to be used the right way. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Thanks, guys, and take care.